Oh, g'day guys. Here we are back again after quite an absence, but the federal executives decided that they would really like me putting out some more of these videos because I think you can feel some of the passion, I guess, when I talk from my heart rather than some of the other options that have been put before us, such as professionals reading pre-scripted news. But nonetheless, we're going to try and get some more of this happening. First on the agenda today, we're going to talk about Cat A licences and our very much disappointment at what a couple of other, what they call themselves unions in this country have done to us. And it relates to what's happening out of Qantas. We've got an airline that have the intentions of rolling out en masse these new half-lamey licences, and because the ALAEA wouldn't negotiate with them to put them into our agreement, they've gone shopping around until they found a couple of unions who would, and they found the AWU and the AMWU have welcomed them with open arms, putting this new category of lamey into the unlicensed aircraft engineers agreement, which is something that will be challenged in court, no doubt. But nonetheless, they've negotiated an outcome that's going to give these people a $6,000 pay rise, and instead they're going to forgo the average $50,000 pay increase they would have otherwise got if they had become a lamey from their AME position. I'm going to put you across now to some of our executive members as they were discussing this issue.
Is not only going to affect the industry, in the end it's going to cost lives. And we can hope that people are smart enough to realise in the end that not only is it going to affect, you know, the economy, the balance of where their children have the advantages of jobs or anything else, but also it may end up costing someone they know their life. And that's where we sit at the moment, that we know we're on a razor's edge. Yep. We need to wake the public up, and we need to wake probably our members up as well.
It's an example of the generic dumbing down to the lowest common denominator, which is because of accountants.
We have pointed out continually the reduction in the number of LAMEs there will be. We've also mentioned that no one's training any apprentices. Now, when all this carry-on completes this work, there won't be enough people to mentor new trainees to do the work.
Cassie's licence, that's what he does. We've got to have the points and the arguments back to say exactly why it's not good.
It's not only a DMARC, it's not only Qantas. We've got to have a go at CASA and the education side of it.
Yep, and that's something we're working on at the moment. At the moment, and I'm hammering it, I'm actually getting some movement and some expressions that, yeah, you're right, from both the Skills Council and CASA, that's setting a Certificate 2 qualification, which is a person who can't work unsupervised in any other industry, has been given a licence that he can't supervise anyone, he can't be supervised.
Righto, in other news, we've just kicked off some EVA negotiations for our members at Virgin, and we've done something a little bit different this time. Rather than go for a big upfront pay rise, we've actually just submitted for a 3% per annum wage agreement over 3 years. And we thought we'd concentrate our efforts in some other areas, such as access to training, specifically to remove some of those restrictions from the new EASA type licences, and other bits and pieces to cover off the fact that car parks are moving further and further from the terminals and getting their uniforms laundered. But there's one thing that we've whacked in there as a formal claim, and that relates to course selection. We want a rotational course selection criteria so that everyone gets access equally to training when their turn comes around. And it's something that we're not just trying to whack into the Virgin Agreement. We're undertaking a little bit of a project at the moment up in Brisbane, heavy maintenance at Qantas, where we're hoping members can all be assigned a place on the list based on the time since they last did their training. And from there, we're hoping that members will only apply for courses if it is their turn, i.e. if there's 10 spots on a course coming up, only the top 10 blokes on the list would apply for that particular course. Something that we would hope to extend possibly beyond the Qantas Brisbane heavy maintenance section, hopefully all sections of Qantas, formerly in the Virgin EBA, and possibly to other companies that also have contentious course selection. Alright, we have a few other bits and pieces going on around the place. We've got our John Holland members considering a national agreement at the moment, which would bring them into line with the Victorian agreement. We've got an industrial officer in Bexley called Noel Spears, and he's been doing some good work around the traps. He's been out west negotiating a new agreement for our CHC members, and they've secured now 4% wage increases and some new offshore allowances. and that's just been passed by a majority of 68% in a ballot. Not the perfect outcome, but overall I think our members were satisfied. Alliance up in Queensland, they're negotiating a new agreement there, and we're hoping that the negotiations with that company go as smoothly as they did last time. We had a very easy time, and we actually wrapped up the whole experience in about 3 meetings, so that was great. And probably a bigger one that Noel's working on is the Jetstar Agreement. Now, Jetstar are an interesting one. We've been to 3 or 4 negotiation meetings with them. They hate the ALAEA, so what they've done, they've formed their own little internal committee. It's this pretend union where they get a few guys who aren't ALAEA members. They negotiate with them in a separate room, and we expect fully that they'll probably come out with some sort of a substandard agreement that's endorsed, of course, by Jetstar themselves and by this little bogus committee they've put together. But nonetheless, we'll keep fighting for the things that are on our next thing that I really want to talk about is the upcoming federal election. And as most members will be aware, the ALAEA isn't formally a member of any political party. We've maybe in the past sort of indicated that our preference will be for a Labor government to be elected, but this Labor government has been such a disappointment. We've decided that what we're going to do, we're going to open our support up to all parties. So I put out a notice a few weeks ago seeing if any of our members would be prepared to stand in the federal election, and surprisingly we've had about half a dozen members who stuck their hand up and said, I'd be prepared to stand on an aviation platform. Like some of the things in there are a second airport for Sydney and access to protected Australian routes only if you employ Australians. And our members from that point, we've emailed all of the parties and said, well, listen, who's going to stand by this aviation platform that we've got? And we didn't hear back from the Labor Party or the Libs. We did hear from Qatar's Australia Party and the Greens. We've gone in and met with the Greens, and the Greens have basically said, look, we very much support everything you've got in your policy paper except for the second airport in Sydney, which is pretty much expected. I think the Greens would like everyone to walk from A to B. But it was Qatar's Australia Party who had a look at the things that were very important to us and said, yeah, we wholeheartedly stand by all of the things you guys want. And it's not just something they dreamed up overnight. The Qatar's Australia Party have actually, through their Member in Parliament, Bob Katter, have already put in for legislation changes that would only allow access to protected Australian routes for airlines that employ Australians. And what I mean by that is you don't get access to the route up to the States if you employ your flight attendants in Thailand. So our executives now endorsed our members to nominate to stand within Qatar's Australia Party, and hopefully that will be endorsed by the party itself, and there would be an announcement probably in a month or so to formalise that process. And probably the last thing I really want to talk about in this update is what Qantas been up to in Sydney. Sydney Line Maintenance, they announced late last year that they wanted to get rid of 98 lamies, and we've been through a series of negotiations with them, consultation, and we found it quite odd that the airline would be able to get rid of so many lamies, particularly considering the average guy there's got 9 months leave in his bank. So we've actually found Qantas quite reasonable to deal with on this matter. They've agreed to put in place a program where people would burn leave at a little bit of a faster rate than they normally would, and in doing so, the 40 odd positions that weren't filled by voluntary redundancies will be covered by people taking that extra leave. So thank you, Qantas, for that.
Look around, round, look around, look around, round, look around, round, look around, round, look around, round, look around, look around, round.
Righto, members, it's time for that segment. We, of course, know this segment is not very politically correct, but some things just have to be said. This time we're going to turn our attention towards Avalon and one of the Qantas managers down there called Paul Moore. Some of you may remember him from Sydney Heavy Maintenance. It appears that Paul's taken a set against some of the employees down there, particularly the ALAEA representatives. And he has put his focus on one in particular representative, Steve Jansen. And Paul has decided that he's going to snoop and hide around corners and try and find these guys doing something technically wrong against the Qantas procedures. And he's lodged some formal application to be heard against Steve that he found that there was the little booties that you put on to go into the cabin when you've got some fresh carpet laid after maintenance. Steve had actually worn those booties in the cabin, but he was also found to be wearing the booties outside of the cabin, and he may have put some dirt on the little boots. So that's gone to some formal hearing for a breach of Qantas policy, and because it's been so ridiculous, our member was exonerated. But not to be outdone, Paul's decided he's going to continue, and he decided to run a toolbox meeting the other day, and he's asked all of the people present to check their chairs to make sure that the chairs are safe to sit on in the smoko room. And after the meeting, he's gone over to the chair that Steve Jansen was sitting on and found that there was a screw loose. And now Steve is facing formal action because he didn't inspect his chair properly. Paul, you are a first-class idiot. You've got a facility down there where 300 people have just been made redundant. You've got an MXI computer system, that is Qantas's new maintenance computer system, where not one 4-staff employee has had any training to understand the system whatsoever, and you're going to carry on like this. Well, you know what, mate? You're the winner of this month's Management Prick of the Month. And just as a final word of advice, as you are snooping around the corners trying to catch our reps out, just remember, stay out of the toilets.